A day rarely goes by without somebody on the news describing it as a big day for Brexit or as a crunch day for proceedings, but yesterday truly was one of those days. Earlier this week, the UK and EU announced that they'd reached a new Brexit deal. The new deal had been approved by UK and EU negotiators, so the next step was for it to get the sign-off from the Parliament. Johnson seemed confident that he could get his deal through Parliament, but as the week progressed, things have begun to look more and more shaky. With the DUP ruling out support and all parties telling MPs to reject the deal, it didn't look like Johnson would get his way. Yesterday was the day that put all that to the test though. Before we get to the proceedings in Parliament, let me encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you like our videos and want more updates on the Brexit process. So, proceedings began at 9:30 AM on Saturday, the first time that Parliament has sat on a Saturday since the Falklands War 37 years ago. Speaker of the House John Bercow welcomed MPs to the session and announced the amendments he'd selected for debate.
Very few brief introductory remarks. First, I want to thank all of the staff of the House who have worked so hard to facilitate the sitting today. Secondly, I would remind honourable members about the need to be mindful of the impact of what they say, not only upon other honourable and right honourable members, but upon others who follow our proceedings. Thirdly, I can inform the House that I have selected Amendment A in the name of Sir Oliver Letwin and others to Motion 1, and the manuscript amendment in the name of Peter Kyle and others to Motion 2.
Remember the Letwin Amendment. That's important and we'll explain it fully later on. The session then got underway, with Johnson making a statement about the deal, attempting to persuade MPs to back his proposal.
Order. Statement. The Prime Minister.
Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, the House has gone to a great deal of trouble to assemble here on a Saturday for the first time in a generation. And I do hope that in assembling for the purposes of a meaningful vote, that we will indeed be allowed to have a meaningful vote. The House will need no reminding that this is the second deal and the fourth vote 3.5 years after the nation voted for Brexit. But I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this is the moment when we can finally achieve that resolution. Many times in the last 30 years, I've heard our European friends remark that this country is half-hearted in its EU membership. And it is true. Opting out of the single currency, not taking part in Schengen, and it's precisely because we are capable of feeling both things at once, sceptical about the modes of EU integration, as we are, but passionate and enthusiastic about Europe, that the whole experience of the last 3.5 years has been so difficult for this country and so divisive. And that is why it is now so urgent for us to move on and to build a new relationship with our friends in the EU.
As I mentioned earlier, other parties don't love the deal, so the reaction to this speech, well, it wasn't exactly positive.
I call the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
He has renegotiated the withdrawal agreement and made it even worse. He's renegotiated the political declaration and made that even worse. We're having a debate today on a text for which there is no economic impact assessment and no accompanying legal advice. This government has sought to avoid scrutiny throughout the process and yesterday evening made empty promises on workers' rights and the environment. This government cannot be trusted and these benches will not be duped.
Then MPs used the time to debate and discuss the Brexit deal they were being asked to vote on.
And in recognition to the previous Prime Minister, I always felt that she had a profound sense of public duty and properly recognised the real risks of no deal and ultimately would not have taken us there. I do not have that level of trust in the current Prime Minister.
If a lorry leaves Dumfries for Northern Ireland and its ultimate destination is the Republic of Ireland, where and when will those customs checks take place?
There have to be checks, and they have to be done at the border between England, Scotland and Wales or Northern Ireland. And there's no getting away from that. This argument the Prime Minister earlier tried to deploy, that he's not putting a border in the Irish Sea, is just wrong. It is absolutely wrong. Any goods that don't fall within that restricted category of being proven that they're not going any further than Northern Ireland are going to be subject to checks, because that is the test written into the deal. The Prime Minister's letter to President Tusk made it clear that from the government's point of view, from his point of view, the point of our exit is to allow the UK to diverge from the rights and standards of the EU. And let's nail this one. You don't need that if you want to go up and have better standards. So anybody who wants to change the rule is not doing it to have the freedom to bring in better standards, because you don't need to change the rule for that. The only reason you need to diverge is if you want to go down.
Even this debate was controversial, with many MPs and officials complaining that they'd not been given long enough to scrutinise such an important document. In fact, the government didn't even release documents explaining the economic impact the deal would have. That being said, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, did welcome the deal, saying it was a net positive and takes away the tail risk of a disorderly Brexit. And this issue of timing is what Letwin's Amendment is all about. The amendment sought to withhold parliamentary approval until the implementation legislation has passed through UK law. This essentially delays the process, but Letwin and others argue that doing so is vital if MPs will have time to protect people from no deal and examine the deal properly. If the amendment passed, it would delay the process, immediately triggering the Benn Act, which requires Johnson to request an extension from the EU. In addition to that, Michael Gove said before the vote that if the amendment was passed, the government wouldn't hold a meaningful vote on Johnson's deal. That's because the Letwin Amendment says MPs are delaying their final approval, so the vote wouldn't actually be them approving the deal, essentially rendering it meaningless. Anyway, here's how the vote played out.
Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 322. The noes to the left, 306.
So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlocked.
As you just heard, the amendment passed 322 votes to 306. A pretty significant victory for Letwin and those supporting his amendment. Given that the amendment wouldn't have passed had 8 MPs voted the other way, the support of the 10 DUP MPs was instrumental. The DUP voted for the amendment in an attempt to stifle the deal, with Sammy Wilson saying that we would be failing our duty if we do not use every strategy which is available. This means that Parliament should now have the chance to fully examine the deal and debate it in more detail. So, this is how Boris Johnson reacted to the result.
Point of order, the Prime Minister.
Debate, an exceptional moment for our country. Alas, the opportunity to have a meaningful vote has effectively been passed up because the meaningful vote has been voided of meaning. But I wish the House to know that I'm not daunted or dismayed by this particular result. But I continue in the very strong belief that the best thing for the UK and for the whole of Europe is for us to leave with this new deal on October the 31st. To anticipate the questions that are coming, I will not negotiate a delay with the EU. And neither does the law compel me to do so. I will tell our friends and colleagues in the EU exactly what I've told everyone in the last 88 days that I've served as Prime Minister, that further delay would be bad for this country, bad for...
So, as you just heard, Johnson still claims he doesn't intend to request an extension, as the Benn Act requires. It also means that the meaningful vote did not take place yesterday. According to Johnson, immediately after the result, his plan is to immediately allow Parliament to begin examining the deal and publish a programme motion detailing how the relevant legislation can be scrutinised and passed before the 31st of October. It's worth noting that even if Parliament agrees to his programme motioning and he were to manage to get everything through by then, he's still legally obliged to send a letter requesting an extension, according to the Benn Act. After Johnson had finished, the Leader of the Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, made a point of order to say the parliamentary timetable was to be amended for a debate on Section 13.1b of the European Withdrawal Act on Monday. This is actually the section of the Act that says that a deal needs to be ratified by Parliament. It's pretty obvious that the government is trying to bring back basically the same business as happened on Saturday, so another debate and vote on the deal. You might remember that Bercow stopped Theresa May from bringing her deal back on a fourth time because, according to Parliamentary convention, the government can't bring the same motion unless circumstances have changed. Chris Leslie MP made this exact point, and Bercow said he'd take some advice and then rule on Monday whether the government could bring another vote on the deal. So there's a chance that Bercow won't actually allow another vote on the deal, which would really piss off the government. Assuming he doesn't, however, this means that Johnson and the Conservative whips have now got 24 hours to try and convince 14 more MPs to vote for his deal on Monday. 12 if you count Oliver Letwin and Nick Bold, who've said they will back the deal with a sensible programme motion. We will be discussing what will happen next in this latest episode of our podcast, out later today, so subscribe to the podcast to get that when it's out. Unfortunately, when this video was created, we still didn't know what Johnson's next steps are, but once it becomes clearer, we will make a video to explain what happened. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to get more updates on what happens next.
You can also hit the bell icon if you want to be notified every time we release a video. And if you want more from us, you can find TLDR across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. And if you want your name featured at the end of the videos, just like these people, then you can sign up to back us on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description.